Martin Stein sat in his car, impatiently waiting for some movement. Eventually, he heard the metallic sound signifying the release of the hydraulic rams holding the ferry doors closed. Then, accompanied by creaks and whines, he saw a crack appear in the bow bulkhead before him. He watched the bow open and the ramp lower and extend into place. Then he had to wait his turn to drive onto solid ground, and then go through customs before he could honestly say he was back in England. He pulled into the customs area and wound down his window, feeling the cold night air slap him. "Do you have anything to declare?" asked the uniformed man as he took Martin's passport. "I've got some cigarettes and alcohol," Martin replied. "But I've only bought them in Holland. Could you pull over to that spot over there, Mr. Stein? We'd like to examine your vehicle." The customs officer pointed at an empty area as he spoke. Martin couldn't believe it. He had made this trip many times before and had never been stopped. Annoyed at the inconvenience, he grumbled to himself as he pulled over to the designated area, closed his window, and waited. Almost 15 minutes went by as Martin wondered if he made the right choice by taking the ferry and road instead of flying. Cigarettes and alcohol, that's it. He could make some money from them, but if customs confiscated the load, he would lose his profit from the past 3 months. He mumbled to himself. Ugh. His personal admonishments were interrupted by a tap on his window. "Mr. Stein, would you please follow me?" A tall man in a slightly wrinkled brown suit spoke. Martin knew it wasn't a request. He got out of his car, locked it, and turned to follow the man. He was led inside a large building, through some corridors, and up 2 flights of stairs before he was finally shown into a room. "Would you mind waiting here for a moment, sir?" Again, not a question. Martin entered the room. It was furnished with a metal frame table, its formica-covered top showing scars from years of use. 2 chairs of matching framework stood on either side. Martin sat in the one furthest from the door, facing it. Eventually, the door opened and the man who led him there returned. He carried a large file and a laptop case. "Mr. Stein, may I call you Martin?" Without waiting for an answer, he continued. "You have just returned from Holland, correct?" Again, not waiting for a response, he said, "There you traveled to Amsterdam, where you met with Mr. Eric van der Zwart, to whom you delivered £2 million worth of diamonds." He watched Martin intently as he spoke. Martin's face turned pale at the mention of Amsterdam, and completely ashen at the precise mention of the diamonds. Martin kept quiet, trying to work out what was going on. He knew he had been doing something dodgy, but he always assumed he could claim ignorance about being a courier for illegal diamonds. Although now it was spelled out for him, he couldn't deny it anymore. He would have had to be foolish to not know what he was carrying. He had suspected it that first time, and he confirmed it when he cracked the combination lock on the case he carried. He did it every time after that, mostly to pass the time on the long ferry crossings, dreaming of the day he would have the courage to escape. He dismissed those thoughts for now and weighed his current situation. He hadn't been arrested or cautioned, and the man in the suit hadn't given his name. Martin knew something was not normal about this, so he just sat and waited for the other man to speak. As Martin's color returned, Inspector Gray watched him closely. "Now, Martin, I think we can help each other." He stared at Martin, judging the confusion that appeared on his face. "As you may have guessed, I am investigating your employer, and no, I don't mean Charles and Curtis Chiswick, for whom you work as an accountant. I mean Mr. Francois Grimard, the one you run errands for, the one your employers send you to." Martin had regained his former pale complexion and his head drooped in defeat. "If you are able to enlighten me and help with my investigation, I have been authorized to offer you a deal." Martin raised his head and looked at the inspector, surprised to see concern on his face. "I am offering you witness protection if you turn in evidence against him." "Yeah, like you did to Derek Bennett? That didn't go well, did it?" Martin spat out, the first time he had spoken since entering the building. "Why don't you just beat me up and turn me over yourself? We were actually thinking of completely removing you from the picture," offered the inspector. If Martin looked bewildered before, now he could only be called dumbfounded. "Of course, if you refuse, we will catch you on your next trip, on your way to Amsterdam, or even worse, your replacement," Gray said. Martin physically shuddered at the thought. He knew he was in trouble. If he said nothing, the best he could hope for was being caught for smuggling. Once the next shipment was intercepted, people would assume he was the informant. If he went to Grimm to confront him, he would probably just get rid of him. Martin slumped in his chair, feeling trapped and hopeless. He was stuck and had no way out. He was deep in trouble and had nowhere to turn. Seeing his defeat, the inspector continued. He outlined the procedure for witness protection, and Martin listened carefully. Martin asked a few questions and was disappointed with the answers. He wasn't convinced that things would go the way he was being told, but every question he threw out, the inspector had an answer for. Then, Martin asked the question that changed his attitude toward the whole experience. "So, where would Angie and I be going?" he asked innocently. The inspector looked at him in surprise. "You don't know?" the inspector asked. Martin looked at him slowly, shaking his head. "Wait here," said Gray as he left the room. He returned carrying some printed sheets of paper and handed them to Martin. "Sign these, and then I'll show you something." Martin carefully read through the documents, signed one, and passed the other back without signing. "The date is wrong by over 3 months. It's dated last January," he explained. The inspector looked annoyed. "Just sign it, will you?" Martin made no move to comply. "We have court orders for phone taps and bugs on nearly every place that Mr. Grimm has any involvement with. We haven't been able to find any valuable information. In fact, everything we find out shows him to be a law-abiding citizen. We believe he's paying someone to keep him informed about the investigation." Martin said nothing. "We realized that he was using you for more than just bookkeeping. I was about to request a court order to bug your house, but I needed another way to get information." The inspector lowered his voice. "I broke the law and got a private investigator to bug your house from the date on the form. I thought if Grimm didn't know it was bugged, he might slip up and say something. I was right. He's been running his illegal business from your house and 2 other houses." Martin became both interested and fearful about what he was going to hear. "Go on. I need you to sign this contract. It'll make things legal," Gray said, sliding the papers over to him. Martin made no move to sign them. "I have found out many things. Things about Francois, his business, your wife, and of course you, Martin." Martin's face turned scarlet. He was angry and ashamed. Angry about the intrusion into his personal life. Ashamed because he knew what had happened in his marriage over the past 6 months. "When was the last time you spent time with your wife, Martin?" "It seems you already know," he replied indignantly. "A week last Monday, when I returned from a trip abroad." Martin said nothing and squirmed uncomfortably in his chair. "In fact, that has been the norm for your love life since we started monitoring your house." "Why do you think that is?" Martin mumbled. "She thinks I'm cheating on her." "Who do you think told her that?" Martin shrugged and mumbled again. "I don't know. It was some stupid idea she got into her head." "You really have no idea." Gray slammed his hand on the unsigned documents. "Just sign them." Martin jumped at the sudden noise but still made no move to sign. "Your wife has been having an affair with Mr. Grimm every time you've been away." As realization hit Martin about what he had just been told, the color drained from his face again, and he bent over and threw up. Inspector Gray looked at him. The vomit sprayed over the table and floor, ruining the documents. He didn't feel disgusted at him or the scene. Martin retched and retched and retched until there was nothing left and his stomach spasms wouldn't stop. Gray left him to finish and pull himself together. He returned with a bucket and mop, cleaned up the mess, and then came back with cloths and disinfectant. He helped Martin clean himself off. He left again and returned with a glass of water and a new set of forms. Martin took both and, after drinking some water, signed the forms. "What time are you expected home tonight?" asked Gray as he did something on his laptop. Voices started coming from it. Looking at his watch, Martin replied, "About half an hour. Here is a live feed from your house. I can only say I am sorry," said Gray as he turned his laptop around and placed it on the table in front of Martin. "You can control the camera with the mouse pad and zoom with the plus and minus keys." On the screen, Martin recognized his bedroom and the 2 people in it. One was Francois Grimmard, the other was his loving wife, Angie. Martin's stomach started to churn, but he couldn't look away from the screen. On another day, with a different subject, Martin would have been impressed by the clarity of the HD picture. Today, all he felt was disgust. "So little Mike hasn't been with you for almost a year now?" Francois' voice came over the speaker. "It will be 8 months next Tuesday, but he hasn't been very interested in being with me. He's happy with the occasional hug, and that's it. He's just not the same as you. Whenever he gets in the mood, he loses all his brain power." Francois said, getting dressed. "I'll send him back home a week from Friday, and I'll make sure he is gone all weekend. I want you to entertain some friends of mine while he is away." He added, emotionlessly, Angie didn't respond immediately. But Frankie, what we have is special. I thought you only wanted to be with me. That's why you told me to stop being with Marty. I said I would like you to entertain my friends, Francois said, his voice slightly menacing. Anything for you, Frankie. You know that. It's just that. Angie trailed off. That's good to hear. You should get more syringes, Francois said, laughing as he tied his tie. With that, he left the room. Martin noticed a small window opening in the top left corner of the screen, showing Francois leaving, followed by other cameras. The look on his wife's face showed that she was not happy with her orders. Martin wondered what she planned to do with it as she got out of bed. You seem to like your salad dressing. She giggled to herself as she picked up the plate and headed out of the bedroom and down the stairs. The system automatically followed her movements, switching cameras and rooms as she walked to the kitchen. He watched as she prepared a salad, adding some herbs and then scraping onto the bowl of salad. He felt disgusted and angry as she tossed it. She then arranged it on the same plate, nibbling on some of it, a look of joy on her face. I am really sorry about all of this, said Inspector Gray. No one deserves to be treated like that. Martin understood that Gray was trying to help him feel better. I'll do anything, Martin choked out. Anything to get away from her. Gray understood, feeling remorseful for showing him the truth. But he needed Martin on his side, needed him to bring down Francoise Grimard. Martin was shaking with anger. He had loved Angie, loved her until he saw everything unfold before him. Now that love had turned into hate, a hate like he had never felt before. I have to ask, even though I know I'll regret it. What was the syringe for? Martin asked. Gray looked at him with sorrow. He wished he didn't have to answer, but he clicked on a file on the laptop and handed it back to Martin. It was another video feed, this time of Martin eating a salad. As he watched, Martin felt sick to his stomach, but there was nothing left to throw up. I wish you would stay away from those other girls. I really want your love and attention again, Angie said to him. But I haven't been seeing anyone, babe. Why won't you believe me? Martin gasped, not realizing how pitiful he sounded. He watched her face, not noticing the evil smile on her face as she accused him once again of being unfaithful. He would have known then, if he hadn't already realized that she was making false accusations just to keep herself available for her lover, who had become her pimp. If she walked into the room at that moment, he would have torn out her faithless heart and ripped off her adulterous head. That was delicious, dear, he heard himself saying, even worse because he meant it. It had been a wonderful meal, but he knew in his heart that he would never be able to look at a lettuce the same way again. You go freshen up, darling, and get ready for me. I'll be up in a minute, he clicked to another camera feed and rewound. She had her back to him as she spoke, and that evil smile was on her face. The smaller window followed Martin upstairs and into the bathroom. I have seen enough, he spat, his rage showing. What do you need me to do? First, I need to know that you can go home and act normally, as if nothing is wrong, Gray said. After what I just saw, no way. But I won't mention our conversation. I won't give anything away, Martin replied. You know your life probably depends on it, right? Gray stated, then asked. You don't have to report back, do you? Shaking his head, Martin said, don't worry about me. Right now I don't care if I live or die. What I do care about is getting revenge on that jerk and the woman I married. Well, as long as you can keep that to yourself, you will apparently be killed while trying to escape in Holland. Then you will be kept in protective custody until after the court case, and finally, you will be given a new life. Martin nodded and asked, can I go now? Inspector Gray thought for a minute. Yes, but you need to have a believable excuse for being late, he said as they left the room. Yes, I thought being stopped by customs would work, Martin replied, as they continued walking. Yes, such a lengthy stop. Gray paused for effect, and yet you managed to bring all of your legally obtained goods through. No issues at all, the inspector said, his suggestion not going unnoticed by Martin. Martin suddenly stopped walking. What? You delayed me for 2 hours, destroyed my marriage, and ruined my life, and now you want to take my perfectly legal items, he shouted. All for the greater good, I assure you, Gray smiled cunningly. The rest of the journey back to Martin's car was spent in silence. Martin was surprised to find his car had been rummaged through. His clothes and other belongings were stacked haphazardly near the trunk. His contraband carefully arranged on a trolley nearby. Sorry, it's just to make it look like you have a chaperone. We can't be too careful, Gray explained. Martin quickly gathered his clothes, threw them in his suitcase, and put it in the trunk. See you soon, the inspector offered. Get lost, replied Martin, getting into his car. He didn't even light a cigarette before driving off. "We'll be watching you at home, but we can't be with you everywhere." "Good luck," said Gray, trying to be supportive. He knew the next week and a half would be very difficult for Martin. As Martin drove home, he was angry. He was angry with his life, his wife, the delay, Mr. Frankie, not so big name Grim, and in his opinion, that thieving jerk cop. He didn't pay much attention to his speed on the way home. What was the point? He believed he would be dead in 10 days. An hour later, he pulled into his driveway. The usually comforting sound of the gravel under his wheels only added to his anger. He turned off the engine and took a few moments to compose himself before getting out and grabbing his suitcase. He locked the car and took a deep breath before heading inside. "Hello, dear. You're later than I expected." Her voice was cold. Martin glared at her, remembering Gray's instructions to act normal. "I heard you," he snapped back. "I've been stuck with customs, if you must know, and they robbed me." "There's no need to take that tone with me." "Well, guess what? I've had enough," he shouted, raising his hand in frustration. "I'm sick of all this traveling, customs, and your constant accusations of me sleeping around. The last person I slept with was you, a long time ago. Now, what do we have for dinner?" Angie's eyes widened in shock. Martin had never yelled at her before, never raised his voice, and he rarely swore, especially not at her. There's a salad in the fridge for." She stammered, her voice sounding like a school principal scolding a student. "That's another thing I can't stand," he yelled, storming into the kitchen. He flung open the fridge door, grabbed the salad, and threw it in the trash. He turned back to Angie. "Now, cook me something proper." "I will not," she shouted back angrily. "In fact, I won't do anything for you until you apologize." The sound of the slap reverberated through the house. "Now, get me something to eat, or get out of my house." "I've had enough of your attitude," he said firmly, still rubbing her cheek. Tears welling up in her eyes, Angie knew he was serious. She began hurrying around the kitchen, searching the freezer for something quick to make. "Would bacon, eggs, and some of your black pudding be all right?" She sobbed, now frightened of her husband. The man who had walked through the door 15 minutes ago, the man she had thought she knew, the man she was starting to like a little more now. "Yes, but no salad," Martin replied, and Angie nodded, wiping away her tears. Martin poured himself a large glass of soda and returned to the kitchen. Angie had a pack of bacon thawing in water. "Maybe some chips and grilled tomato?" she asked. "That would be lovely," he replied, sitting down with the newspaper. "And I'll have beans instead of tomatoes." Angie said nothing, trying to hold back her tears. Today she knew it would be different, and part of her was relieved. Part of her liked this new side of Martin. She turned on the deep fryer and started peeling the potatoes for the chips. Soon, Martin was enjoying his breakfast: twice fried chips, 2 thick slices of buttered bread, and the black pudding he loved. He had learned to make it from his father, a butcher, and preferred his homemade version over the store-bought variety. As he ate, he couldn't help but notice Angie's eyes darting to her handbag and a flush on her cheeks. He also noticed she made no move to pick it up as she left the room. "I should have done this months ago," he thought to himself, checking to make sure the syringe was still in Angie's handbag before following her upstairs 20 minutes later. She started to question why she had gotten with Frankie in the first place. Frankie was too dangerous, and for the first time in almost a year, she realized she was in over her head. Their fling had turned into an affair, and now it had condemned her. As her thoughts moved to the acts Frankie had made her do to her husband, she froze in horror. She felt a deep shame and disgust at her own actions as she looked at herself in the mirror. Her face, which she had previously thought of as beautiful, now appeared ugly and depraved. As he almost ran to his car, he remembered he had to maintain his usual air of depression. He had to act like a downtrodden husband, doing what he needed to do to make a living. As he drove to work, he thought about what he once had, how it had been destroyed by his unfaithful wife and that conniving, manipulative Frankie Grimard. Chapter 2, when he arrived at his office, his anger from the previous night returned, manifesting in a despondent expression on his face. The weight of his actions for the near future burdened him heavily. Only those who knew him well would notice any difference, perceiving only the usual sad and angry man, hunched over, trying to hide his own insignificance. Just before noon, Charles Chiswick questioned Martin about his delay at the port. If Martin didn't know what he knew now, he would have wondered why Charles was interested and how he found out. He still wondered how Charles knew. After returning to his office, Martin contemplated this. In his mind, there were several possibilities. The most likely was that his wife had told Frankie. The second and third possibilities were that his car and/or house were bugged with surveillance he didn't know about. Either he or his house was being watched, or that cursed cop had an informant in his department. The thought of the last possibility chilled Martin to the bone. If it were true, he was as good as dead. Once that thought entered his mind, it refused to leave. He anticipated a gunman jumping out at every traffic light, seeing a gun in every passing car, even a police car. He made it home without incident, but still felt apprehensive as he crossed the threshold and locked the door behind him. For the first time in many years, Angie greeted him with excitement. She ran to him and gave him a tight hug. Was this how she greeted Frankie? How many times? He wondered, had Frankie given her a special treat? The thought made him lose interest, and he said, "Something smells nice. What's for dinner?" He looked at her. She seemed disappointed and confused. Her mouth fluttered as she struggled to answer. Y-D-I. Steak and ale pudding, mashed vegetables, and gravy. He caught a glimpse of her eyes watering up before she let go of him and rushed upstairs. Martin felt a tear forming as well. He also felt confusion. Was she having second thoughts? Had she come back to him? Should he try and take her with him on his final trip to Europe? He looked up the stairs, thinking about going to her, but the thought of her with Grimard sprang back, bringing with it memories of the many times she had pushed him away, the knowledge of what she had made him do. He shuddered at the thought, remembering the syringe. He looked for and found her handbag. He searched through its contents. The syringe was gone. His stomach churned at the thought, but he managed to swallow it back down. The cooking food smelled good, but he now had lost his appetite. He moved into the living room and poured himself a drink and turned on the television. He heard her come back down the stairs and busy herself in the kitchen. He sat in front of the TV, not so much watching it, but having a visible focus. He knew his rejection had been a bad move. He also knew it was instinctive, and not so much rejection as disgust. He lit a cigarette and went over the things he had been told, how he should behave normally at home, how he should have eaten the contaminated salad, and said thank you. He also thought about the change in her attitude. Was it the slap? Or was it because he just did something he shouldn't have? Either way, he liked the change. He also liked the greeting he received. He thought it over until she called him through to eat. He poured himself another drink before joining her in the kitchen. One of his favorite meals, one she had not prepared for him for at least 2 years. He felt sadness as he looked down at the meal before him. He felt anger as he realized it had been that long. The decay in his marriage must have been there a long time. Putting the idea out of his head that the feast on his plate could contain something he did not want to eat, he cautiously took a bite. His taste buds exploded with delight as he chewed his first bite. It was better than he remembered. Either she had outdone herself, or something added an extra flavor. His stomach turned at the thought. He struggled to control himself. "Everything all right, darling?" she asked, noticing the discomfort on his face. He finished chewing and swallowed before he answered. "Really good, love. It feels like ages since you cooked this for us. Sorry about earlier. I didn't mean to reject you. It just caught me off guard. It's been a long while since you welcomed me home from work like that." "No, not a shock. Just caught me by surprise. Maybe we could try again after dinner?" "Did you do anything today?" he asked her. "Not much, just some shopping. Housework, cook dinner," she replied. "That's it. Didn't you go see someone?" "No one came over," he pressed. "No. Oh, I talked to Charlotte on the phone," she said. Ah. Martin thought to himself, Charlotte worked for Grimard. He didn't know her official position but suspected she worked for him. It was probably her that informed Grimard of his delay. "She told me that. That man, she works for Frank. Françoise Grimard has a job opening. I thought I might apply. She said she would put in a good word for me." Martin's mind raced. On one hand, he didn't want his wife to work for that jerk, but on the other hand, she deserved whatever she got. Then again, why should that jerk get his own way? Making a decision, he spoke, careful not to say anything negative about Grimard that might get back to him. "We don't really need you to work. We manage well enough. I would rather things stay as they are. You taking care of the house and me, while I go out and work. It satisfies the traditional man in me." Her smile didn't falter. If anything, he saw a brief flash of relief flicker across her face. "It's just that Charlotte said he pays well, and he is a good person to work for," she explained. "You would be able to stop traveling. We could have more time together, get our relationship back to where it used to be. I doubt it. He growled, losing his control for a second. Regaining it, he continued and lied. I mean, it would take months for me to train someone in all the intricacies of what I do when I am in Europe. Besides, I have been waiting until it was official, but there may be a little promotion coming up. Ooh, she squealed as she ran around the table. What has gotten into him? She wondered as she searched for a soothing ointment. After tending to herself, she returned to bed to find Martin snoring. She lay down next to him and started sobbing again, unable to find comfort in sleep. Angie stirred as Martin turned off the alarm. She looked at him sleeping, noticing the occasional grimace that crossed his face. His slumber was far from peaceful. Good, Martin thought as he got out of bed. He threw himself into work, trying to distract himself from the thoughts that consumed his mind. At times, he couldn't help but give in and contemplate his situation. He analyzed the pros and cons, but found very few pros and a long list of cons. He had thought they had a good life together, but now he realized that she had changed. He couldn't forgive her actions and the person she had become with someone else. It wasn't the woman he had fallen in love with. Feeling sick to his stomach, he vomited into his wastebasket. Curtis entered his room and asked, "Feeling rough, Martin? Something didn't agree with you?" If Martin had looked up, he would have seen the malicious grin on Curtis's face and known that he was aware of Martin's betrayal. Although he couldn't see the smirk, Martin understood the meaning behind the comment. He continued to vomit, realizing that just dying wouldn't be enough. "Sorry, not feeling too well," Martin apologized. "Excuse me, I'll be back in a moment." Martin left Curtis's presence and headed to the bathroom to clean up. As he flushed the vomit from his mouth, he made the decision to leave. He would take the rest of the week off, no longer concerned about keeping his job. In a week, he would be officially gone. "Feeling better?" Curtis asked as Martin entered his office. "Not really, I think I'll go home for the day. I'll either be in tomorrow or I'll call," Martin replied. Curtis didn't respond, surprised by Martin's assertiveness while under the weather. As Martin drove home, Angie struggled to break up with her lover. She didn't make much progress. "Listen, I made a mistake being with you. It's wrong, and I can't believe you would share me with your friends. Please leave me alone," she pleaded. "I own you now. You'll do what I want, when I want. If you don't want your husband to find out about us, or if you want him to stay healthy, don't even think about confessing," Frank calmly threatened over the phone. "No, you can't," Angie whispered after Frank hung up. If regret had consumed her before, now she was terrified for herself and for Martin. When she heard his car pull up outside, she wished she could disappear. An idea struck Martin as he drove home. He thought about the details of his plan, working out the logistics. When he arrived home, he sat in his car for a moment, going over the final details in his mind. He grinned with satisfaction. His plan was simple, with only one complication. If it worked, he would be free, but if not, he would have to go with the backup plan suggested by his anonymous friend. He heard footsteps on the stairs as he unlocked the front door. Entering the house, he could hear the shower running. Did I just miss a visit from Frank? He wondered. He was brewing tea when Angie came downstairs, her eyes red from crying. "You've been crying, haven't you? Is it because of how rough I was with you last night?" Martin asked, grateful for the excuse she provided. Defensively, she denied it and blamed it on getting soap in her eyes. "Is it too late to be taking a shower?" Martin stated, his voice carrying an edge of suspicion. "I had a rough night and slept in." "I haven't been up for long," she replied nervously. "Why are you home?" "I was sick at the office, so I came home," he explained while scanning the room for any signs of recent infidelity. He found none. "I think I'll lie down for a while," Martin said calmly, watching for any signs of guilt or a freshly used bed. He saw both, and he felt another piece of his love slipping away. He was relieved to find that aside from an unmade bed, there were no signs of recent infidelity. He straightened the quilt and lay down. He lay in bed for an hour, sorting out the one complication in his plan. It would be easy if he didn't have a chaperone, as the anonymous friend had called it. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't figure out a way around it. The only possibility required a change in his routine, but he had a valid excuse for that. Smiling to himself, he jumped up from the bed and started packing 2 suitcases. He went downstairs to his wife, noticing the traces of tears on her face. "Darling, you've been crying. Is it because of how roughly I treated you last night?" Grateful for the excuse, she agreed. "I think we should go away for a few days. We need to figure things out because it seems like we're not on the same page. When I want you, you don't want me, and vice versa. Maybe a short break will help us get back in sync," he suggested. Her eyes lit up momentarily before fear returned. "How long?" she asked. "I'll call Charles later. If he says no, we'll leave tomorrow evening as soon as I get home and come back late Sunday. If he says yes, I'll try for the whole next week," he informed her. "So it's up to you. Do we take a definite 3 days or risk it for a possible 10 days, even though it could end up being just 2? She knew it wouldn't be 10 days, but the idea of escaping from Frank's grasp, even for a short amount of time, was appealing. "Yes, please. Where do you want to go? Let's decide after I find out how long I can take off," he said with a smile. "I brewed some tea earlier, but I doubt it's still good. I'll make a fresh pot," she offered, reaching for the kettle. Over a cup of tea, they chatted about possible destinations and things they would like to do or see. Both of them were remembering how it used to be between them, covering up their own secrets and agendas. Martin waited until just after 3:30 before he called Charles Chiswick. "Hello, Charles, it's Martin. Curtis said you went home sick. Are you feeling better?" "Somewhat, still feeling a little queasy. I think it's best if I take tomorrow off too. But I was wondering if I could take next week off as a holiday. Angie and I have been talking, and we would like to get away for a few days." "That would be all right with me. Hang on, I will check with Curtis to make sure he doesn't have anything planned for you." Martin could hear a mumbled conversation in the background. After a couple of minutes, Charles spoke to him again. "We will need you back at the end of next week, so we will see you Thursday. Goodbye." Martin never got used to the way Charles and Curtis ended a call with a simple goodbye and hang up, without giving the other person a chance to say goodbye. He turned to Angie. "We are coming back home on Wednesday." Angie forced a smile. She had hoped there would be a way out of her situation. "I suppose that means you'll be heading over to Europe again?" she asked. He didn't say, he replied, although both of them knew he didn't need to. Martin grabbed the suitcases from the bedroom and locked them in the trunk of the car. "I didn't realize you had already packed. Do you want to get going right away?" said Angie. "Ready when you are," he replied. I'll just use the bathroom." As soon as she was out of sight, he looked in her handbag. He was relieved to see there was no syringe. He took her phone out and kicked it under a chair. Closing her handbag, he took it out to the car. He was returning inside when she met him at the door. "Have you seen my handbag?" she asked. "Yes, I just put it in the car. Come here. We might as well start as we mean to continue." He grabbed her and pulled her close. Martin loved to drive. He was one of those people who memorized maps and numbers. Perhaps it was the numbers that he held in his head. As he made his way north and west, until he connected with the A1 at Redford, they discussed their plans. They headed north for another couple of hours before finding a hotel for the night. Conversation was sparse, as both of them were lost in their own thoughts. Angie couldn't stop thinking about ways to get out of her predicament without her husband finding out. She felt torn between her love for him and the man she had been involved with. Martin had his own thoughts. He was still angry with her for betraying him and disrespecting him. He needed to get back at her somehow, but he didn't want to use the woman he once loved as a pawn in his revenge. They arrived at Rosslyn Chapel the following day, a place they had visited years before it became famous. They both agreed it looked better now that the roof had been restored. They then headed into Edinburgh in the afternoon. Martin ignored the oil warning light in the car, reassuring Angie when she mentioned how noisy the engine was. They checked into a hotel in Edinburgh, had a late lunch, and did some sightseeing. They visited the castle and went on a ghost tour before returning to the hotel for a late dinner. Martin tried out various types of whiskey, and Angie had to help him back to their room. They barely made the 10:30 checkout time, and Martin insisted on taking another walk around the city. Angie assumed it was to sober up, but he had other plans. They wandered around, and Angie found herself looking at the work displayed in an upmarket hair salon. Martin told her to go in and see if they could fit her in, and they could. While she had her hair done, he went to the nearby branch of his bank and withdrew a large sum of money. He also paid for their month's accommodation that he had arranged the day before. He bought a Scotch pie and a bottle of soda before meeting back up with Angie. After retrieving the car, they continued heading north. Martin continued to ignore the oil warning light, and when Angie mentioned how noisy the engine was, he assured her it was nothing to worry about. They were almost at Junction 2 on the M90 when the engine suddenly died, accompanied by a cloud of smoke. It was only then that Angie discovered she didn't have her phone. Martin called for roadside assistance as they waited to be rescued. Angie complained to him about not picking up her phone. "But it's always in your handbag." "Are you sure you didn't lose it somewhere? Besides, I have mine." You can use it if you want, he replied. I doubt the service will be good here, though, once we get where we're going. She had no answer. She didn't really need her phone. She only used it to talk to her friends or when she was told to get ready because Frank was on his way. The AA man arrived and told them that the engine had run out of oil and had seized. Martin was impressed that it had lasted so long since he fixed it that first night. No problem, it's a company car, Martin assured her as they were transported to a suitable repair shop. We'll rent a car and get reimbursed for it when we get back. Less than 4 hours later, they were once again heading up the M90 in an almost new Toyota Auris. Less than 3 hours after that, they arrived at a small croft with no sign of civilization in sight. They had seen no other houses for over half an hour as Martin drove along the maze of lanes. Where are we? She asked. Somewhere in the middle of the Grampians, at least 20 miles from anyone else that I know of, he replied, grinning. You planned this without telling me? How? He didn't answer her. They explored the croft and found it well furnished but still sparse in some areas. They were amazed at the thickness of the stone walls. They also found a pantry, fridge, and freezer well stocked for 2 people for over a month. In their secluded location, there wasn't much to do other than walk and stargaze. As Martin's reminder alarm went off, reminding him that it was Wednesday morning, he gulped. Now was the time for the confrontation, time to tell her what he knew. He made a pot of tea and took it to the bedroom. Ooh, sweetie, thank you, she cooed. Angie, I have something important I need to say. Something I need to tell you, he blurted out. She looked at him, concern filling her eyes. What's wrong, sweetie? She asked. I know, Angie. I know everything what you've been doing with that other person and what he had planned for you this weekend, he said, choking back a sob. And what makes it even worse is how you've been treating me. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I've been trying to end things with him, but he said he wants me to. She curled up on the bed, crying. I'm going to leave you here. He won't be able to find you. You have plenty of food. I'll be back sometime after the weekend, maybe a few days longer. In the meantime, he stated, you have decisions to make. Whether you want to stay married to me or not. While I'm gone, you can write a full confession. I want to know why, what, and when everything. I'll read it when I come to get you. Then I'll decide if I want to stay with you. He turned to leave her, and as he reached the door, he said curtly, don't try going anywhere. You might get lost and be in danger. Goodbye. Martin got up and left her crying on the bed. It was dark before she moved. Meanwhile, Martin solemnly headed south. As soon as his phone got a signal, it began chirping with text after text. He pulled over to check them. One told him his car was repaired and ready to pick up. 2 were from the brothers who were reminding him that he was due back on Thursday. The one from Curtis asked how he was enjoying Dunfermline. Martin smiled all the way to Dunfermline to pick up his car. He now knew it was fitted with a tracker, so he was unlikely to have a chaperone. He picked up his car and paid for it with his credit card. Apparently the sump had cracked. It looked almost as if someone had done it deliberately using a jack, the man told him as he moved a suitcase and a heavy bag from the Auris and put them into his car. He then drove the Auris to the place he had rented it from, getting there just before closing. One of their staff members took him back to his car after he paid with his credit card again. Soon, he was heading back south. He only stopped once more at a service station for a break, coffee, and to use the facilities. He arrived home just after 10:30, having stopped off at his local fish and chip shop to get some food to take and eat at home. He enjoyed his meal with a soda, a snack, and another soda for dessert. He crumpled up the paper he had eaten his food from, remembering her phone as he did so. He searched under the chair for it and found it. There were several missed calls from Charlotte, more from an unfamiliar number. Neither her phone nor Martin recognized that number. Several more were calls from her friends. There were also several texts from Charlotte asking her where she was or wanting her to call. There were also several more from other friends, all asking the same, and one from a number that neither her phone nor Martin recognized. It said, Fry 7 p.m. 4 guests make dinner no pork. What a jerk, he thought angrily. Then he smirked, knowing he had disrupted those plans. He also wondered if there was some way to bother Frankie Grimard even more. He had an idea and went to sleep with a smile on his face. Angie had cried nonstop since Martin left until she had no more tears left. Now all she had for company were her own regret and sadness. Martin woke up at 6, an hour early, and called a friend. Hey, I hope it's not too early, said Martin. Hey there, yes, you're early. What can I do for you? The voice on the phone replied. Got someone to get rid of? Martin smiled at his friend's joke and wondered what his reaction would be if he said yes. Not just yet. Maybe soon. But in the meantime, I'm doing something for some friends of Angie's. How soon can I get some? Asked Martin. Today, if you want. The usual, his friend replied. Any chance of, Martin thought for a second. Forget it, 2 gallons. Really? His friend asked, surprised. Really? All right, I can do that. When will you be over? Tonight, but it might be a bit later than usual. Is that okay? Sure thing. See you later. Yeah, see you tonight. Martin hung up and took a shower. He left in good time to stop at a DIY shop on his way to work. He easily found what he needed, so he arrived early to work, feeling happy and making sure everyone knew. You seem happy today, Martin observed Curtis when he entered Martin's office. Yes, Angie and I have had a great few days. We haven't been getting along recently, but we seem to have sorted things out now. Thanks for asking, he said cheerfully. Actually, we're going away again for the weekend starting tomorrow night. Well, that's good, said Curtis. Have you heard from Mr. Grimard this week? No, why? Has he said anything to you? No, nothing, replied Curtis. That's a shame. I could have taken her with me. She'd love to see Amsterdam or Brussels. Curtis left without giving any of his usual condescending remarks. 5 minutes later, Martin's phone rang. Martin's, I need you to go to Brussels tomorrow morning. This one is a little different. After you make your normal delivery, I need you to wait over the weekend and bring a package back with you on Monday. It needs to be extra secretive, so don't bring your wife for a dirty weekend, okay? The voice on the phone spoke quickly, not allowing any chance for interruption. Yes, Mr. Grimard. Is it the usual time and place for the pickup on this end? Martin asked. No. Can you pick up early? 6 o'clock in the morning. You'll receive a call with the details for the other job. Mr. Grimard informed Martin and hung up. Martin looked at the receiver as the dial tone filled the room. He was still infuriated by Grimard's rudeness after all these years. I wonder if the guests tomorrow are my employers. No matter whoever they are, they won't be happy 5 minutes after they enter my house. Without physically hanging up the phone, he booked a crossing for himself and his car on the Eurostar, leaving at 9:15 from Folkestone. Then he began looking for a reasonably priced bed and breakfast to stay in over the weekend. He left work early at 4 o'clock and drove to a large toy store. From there, he went to visit Graham, the pig farmer. Once he finished his business with Graham, he loaded the 2-gallon containers of pig's blood into the trunk of his car and set off down the lane to get back to the main road. Halfway to the road, a car appeared in Martin's headlights. It had no lights on and was blocking the lane. He became fearful and sweat began pouring from his skin. Slowly, he moved closer to see if there was any chance of getting by. There was none. Martin peered to see if anyone was with the car, but it seemed unoccupied. Cursing, he put his car in reverse just as his door was flung open. Mr. Stein, we meet again, said the silhouette. Martin recognized the voice even though he couldn't see the person clearly. Inspector, he exclaimed with relief. Apologies for the secrecy of our meeting, but we observed something the other day. There are more bugs in your house and office than we placed there, the inspector told him. What about the car? Martin asked. We checked that while it was being fixed. There's a tracker, but nothing else. So what have you done with your wife, by the way? The policeman asked. She's relaxing in Scotland, reflecting on her mistakes. I'm hoping you'll send someone to find her after my, disappearance, answered Martin. She has enough supplies to last at least another 2 weeks, maybe more. She's safe where she is for now. You're a good man, better than me, the inspector admitted. Part of him had hoped the pigs were feasting on her treacherous actions, though most of him didn't want the paperwork. Tomorrow, you'll travel along the A16 and E40 to Nieuwe-Stallestraat in St. Petersloe, Belgium. Take exit 18 Roosbroek from the E19. At some point, you'll be pulled over and there will be a tragic accident, okay? The inspector effortlessly rattled off the French and Belgian names. Martin nodded in agreement. I was wondering, I'm worried someone will break into my house tomorrow. Would you be able to make sure the culprits are arrested? For some reason, I think the burglary might happen a little after 7, Martin asked hesitantly. And don't let any officers enter until they've heard a loud noise. That won't be a problem. See you on the other side, said the inspector before returning to his car. The inspector backed his car into a passing place, and Martin drove past, reassured by the meeting. Once home, Martin brought in his purchases and began preparing a surprise for his wife's guests. First, he emptied the rat poison and blended it to a pulp. He added it to the pig's blood. Hopefully this will slow down or prevent some clotting, he thought as he shook each container to mix it in. He unrolled some light plastic tubing and attached one end to the compressor in his garage. He ran it through an air vent in his kitchen and into the living room. Then, he installed a switch that would be triggered when someone opened his front door. He checked the setup with several trial runs before adding the final pieces and going to bed. Martin woke up to his alarm at 5 in the morning. He got dressed and, after drinking some coffee, he made the final necessary adjustments for his plan to work. After double-checking everything, he kicked his front door to break the lock. Then, he wedged it closed from the inside, set the trap, and left through the back door. He drove to pick up his package. At 8:30, he was in line to drive onto his train. He took out his wife's phone and sent a text that said, "Let yourself in. I might have to step out for half an hour." Then he removed the battery. 15 minutes later, he sat in his car on one of the Eurostar carriages. He checked behind him, then lifted the briefcase from the footwell next to him. If he was correct, this would be one of 4 identical cases, each one he had learned the combination to on previous trips. It was something to occupy his mind during the boring ferry crossings. On the 3rd attempt, he succeeded in opening the valise. Martin took a breath after each lock popped open. Furtively, he checked his surroundings to ensure that the occupants of the cars directly in front and behind him weren't watching. He looked inside the case, finding the expected bag. He removed it and closed the case. Sweating profusely, he checked fore and aft again before returning the case to the adjacent footwell. He waited for his trembling hands to still before he looked inside the small velvet bag. He exhaled sharply when he saw its glittering contents. His heart raced as he reached into his jacket for his wallet. He pulled it out, trying to calm himself. He took deep breaths until he felt able to open his wallet and take out a small foil packet. Just over an hour after he drove onto the train, he was driving off. 20 minutes after that, he was through customs and heading toward Belgium on the main A16. About 2 hours later, he was pulled over. "Hey, quick, come on," a man with a French accent said urgently, almost pulling him from his car to a waiting van. Martin was flung through the side door, and the van pulled away rapidly. He estimated they had moved no more than 200 yards when he heard the sickening hollow impact of a car being hit by something large and heavy, followed 30 seconds later by a distant thump of igniting fuel. "Hey, are you alive?" The Frenchman smiled at him, covering him with the strong scent of garlic. Martin's journey was uneventful, save for changing vehicles twice, both times undercover. There were no attempts at conversation from any of his brief traveling companions. Just over 3 hours later, he was being rushed through a door in a back street. He didn't know where he was. He was pushed toward some stairs. He climbed them obediently. There was one door at the top. It opened as he neared it. "Come in, Martin." A familiar voice greeted him. Martin said nothing. He was more than a little overwhelmed with the events that had occurred to him since being pulled over. "You were pulled over for a routine traffic stop. One of your brake lights was faulty. Unfortunately, you were hit by a large truck hauling steel. I am afraid you were killed instantly. Your body is only identifiable from DNA and dental records. I am afraid your wife is a widow." His voice was filled with pride as he spoke. Martin sat quietly, only now truly comprehending his past life was over. All he had known prior to this morning was gone. There was a knock at the door. A man came in, spoke to the policeman in hushed tones, and left. "It seems we got to you in time. The case you picked up this morning had nothing in it. Nothing worthwhile. We also found out there has been a contract taken out on you. We don't think you were supposed to return from this trip." Martin was shocked. You mean if you were not already dead, then you soon would be." The inspector confirmed. Martin's face lost all its color. He began to shake. The inspector pulled a hip flask from his pocket and, after twisting off the top, passed it to Martin. "Here, take it." Martin took the flask and sniffed it, then took a deep drink of the brandy contained within. The warmth flowed from his mouth and through his chest, helping to numb the shock from the news he had just received. Inside, he was rejoicing. They thought the case was empty when he left. His loyalty to Angie had made him want to take her with him, but his anger wanted her to suffer. He had been torn, wanting both to happen. No, what he really wanted was that none of it had happened. Eventually, he concluded that at least she will suffer by mourning his death, possibly blaming herself or her pimp. That would be her punishment, and it would have to be enough. Martin was given a file and told that was who he is now. He just stared at it. "You need to learn most, if not all, that is contained inside that folder," said the policeman. He then spent some time telling Martin what was going to happen over the next couple of weeks before he was moved into his new life. He then pulled out a laptop. "I thought you might like to monitor your old house. It is almost 7 now back home." Martin pulled his wife's phone out and reinserted the battery. The laptop screen flickered to life. The inspector made a couple of clicks and several windows appeared on the screen. Each one held a different view from in or outside Martin's former home. In one window, a black car pulled up. 4 men exited the car: Frank, Curtis, and 2 unknown men. They moved toward the door, dropping off the bottom of the screen. Martin clicked on the window, showing his front door from the inside. He heard the doorbell, saw shadows through the glass. The door swung open. Martin heard the expected hum start up and smiled. He heard Frank speak in an unknown language. He knew Frank's family was from Senegal. He assumed it was their native tongue. He heard Curtis say, "Wow, Frank, you don't know your own strength. You've broke the door in." "Nah, not me, man," he heard Frank's reply. "That guy should be here. He's not answered her phone all day. We'll make him pay later. Simon." Frank led them through to the living room, oblivious to the subtle hum from the garage. They entered the lounge. The electronic voyeur switched view. All 3 men took seats and Curtis moved toward the drink stocked on the side. How all of them failed to notice the expanding orange balloon in the corner nearest the door will go down as one of life's unexplained mysteries. Curtis saw it first as he was bringing drinks over to his companions. "What the heck is?" Boom. It was a very loud bang. Anyone outside the house could be forgiven if they thought it was a loud noise. It was all Martin had wished for. The bouncy toy, already having 2 gallons of fake blood pumped in it, had been summarily pumped with air until bursting, covering the house occupants and living room in red. Curtis was far from happy, but the 3 men were cursing every person involved. Martin sent a text to Frank from his wife's phone. Fake blood. If Frankie had been angry before reading that text, he was furious after reading it. He screamed something unintelligible before the door flew open again, and 6 armed policemen ran in, threw all 4 on the floor at gunpoint, and arrested them. Both Martin and his companion laughed heartily at the spectacle unfolding on the screen. "What the heck was that?" masked the policeman. "Fake blood. Nice touch, right? Haha, if you weren't already dead, he'd kill you now for sure. Ha 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 ha. He will think it was my wife. Haha, and I thought you let her off too easily. Haha." The thought cut through Martin like a knife. If Frank thought Angie responsible, he would do anything to get revenge. She was as dead as himself. The realization tempered his mood. He lost the urge to laugh. "I didn't think it through. I don't want her harmed." His voice almost pleading as the possible consequences of his joke flipped through his mind. "No matter, we can't do anything to help her," stated the inspector. "Can't or won't?" asked Martin, fixing him with a cold stare. "Perhaps I can't testify." The glare he received in reply told Martin, for the moment at least, he had no bargaining power. The reality that both he and his wife were imprisoned, admittedly for their own protection, but prisoners all the same, struck home. 5. Several hundred miles away, Angie had been busy, thinking, writing, crossing out, rethinking, and rewriting her confession. "My darling husband, I am sorry for the things I have done, both with Frankie Grimm and to you. I can't begin to tell you how sorry I am or how I can ask you to forgive me. As you no doubt have guessed, it was all because of Charlotte. About a year ago you were away and Charlotte told me she had a double date with Marie and Frank and another man. She told me Marie had to drop out and asked if I could make up the number. I said no, but she told me she was desperate. She assured me nothing would be expected. Physically, like a fool, I believed her. The date was dinner and dancing. I was paired off with Frank. I don't know really how we went from the club to his bed. I have tried to understand. I tried to understand for weeks after that first time and again since you left me up here. All I know is I can't explain it. I have to admit, I found him attractive when I first met him. There is something about powerful men. I can't explain it, but even you have to admit he is powerful, but he was just too difficult to refuse. I felt so guilty that I had betrayed you. The next time you were away, Charlotte told me he wanted to see me again. I told her no. I did, honest. You have to believe me. He came to the house without an invitation. Late at night, I didn't want to let him in. He said he just wanted to talk about what had happened the last time, so I invited him in for a drink and to talk. Just talk. Really, that was the only reason I let him through the door. I shouldn't have. Maybe we could have recovered what we had. When he left, I cried myself to sleep. I would like to say I wished it was you, but by then I was hooked. At the time I was glad he had me there first. It was only when you took it by force did I begin to see it was you that should have been with me like he was. That the only reason you hadn't treated me poorly was because you loved me, you respected me, and you treated me as an equal. Now as I face my foolishness, my lack of respect, and the fact I treated you poorly, I realize I couldn't have any more regrets about how I've been behaving with him. I am sorry, my love, but I cannot even begin to describe the infatuation I felt and the desires he made me feel. I have no right to ask for forgiveness, and you should not even entertain the idea. If there are consequences for my actions, I will have to face them. Goodbye, my love, Angie XX. She folded the note and placed it on the table, putting her handbag on top. Grabbing a knife from the drawer and crying, she made her way to the bathroom, took off her clothes, and filled the bathtub with hot water. 6. Martin was kept in that small apartment for a week, ordering takeout for meals. He was either being questioned about his knowledge of the Grimm's business, being coached for his court appearance, or being prepared for his new life as Eric Williams. Almost every day he had to swallow that important pill. A week later, he was moved to a more comfortable and private location, where Inspector Gray paid him a visit. Eric could sense that something was wrong as soon as Gray entered the cottage. His 2 guards quickly disappeared. Gray looked at him, sadness in his eyes. Martin, Eric, I have some news, and it's not good. We sent someone to find your wife. There's no easy way to say this, but she took her own life. She was found in the bathtub with cuts on her wrists. Eric fell to the floor in shock and began to cry. Gray looked at him, feeling helpless. He wanted to say something comforting, but he couldn't find the right words. The only thing he could think of was the insincere phrase often used in American crime TV shows, "I am sorry for your loss." He said it, but he knew it wasn't enough. Eventually, he managed to say, "You shouldn't blame yourself." Eric looked up at him from the floor, anger flushing his face. "Blame myself? Why would you think I would do that? I blame that awful person and the person I married. Blaming myself doesn't even come into the picture. To be honest, in a way, I'm relieved, but that doesn't mean I'm not sorry. For heaven's sake, I loved her for a long time." Gray studied him and reached into his jacket, pulling out a flask. "I have 2 bottles in the car. Probably stolen from me, I bet. Bring it in. I need a drink." Eric snapped. "Eric, there was a note for you. I have a copy, but I'm not sure if you should read it. I'm not sure it will help." Gray pulled out a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket and handed it over to Eric. Eric looked at the paper, contemplating whether he wanted to read his wife's farewell message. He nodded, more to himself than to the inspector, before taking it from Gray's hand. Gray watched him as he opened it and then left him alone to read it. He paused at the door and looked back at him before turning and going to his car to get the alcohol. "That awful person. She did those things to me, and now she's taken the easy way out. I wish I had made her suffer like that person's companion." Those were Eric's words, but deep inside he felt regret. He regretted leaving her alone up there. He regretted getting involved in a situation that made her an easy target. He regretted the whole situation, but most of all, he now regretted the fact that he would never be able to hold her in his arms again. He and Gray got drunk together. Eric talked about his life as Martin and the early happy days with Angie. Gray eventually revealed his own name. Eric's mood kept changing, and at one point he became so sad that Gray started to wonder if he could bring him back. Then he remembered that, as far as he knew, Eric wasn't yet aware of the consequences of his trap. "Do you remember the surprise you left for Francois and his friends?" Gray asked. He was rewarded with a smile emerging on Eric's tear-stained face. "We should be able to put Mr. Grimmard behind bars for a long time based on their confessions alone. The Chiswick brothers were also extremely helpful, and you may not even have to testify." Gray let that sink in. "Your act of revenge has been more beneficial than we could have imagined." Eric smiled upon hearing the news. He hadn't been looking forward to being in court and letting Frankie Boy know he was still alive. "I don't think we could have prevented that for long, even with those scumbags locked up. Other people would have come for her." Gray fell silent, questioning if he should have shared that information. "I'm furious about what he did, what she did, and the whole messed up situation," Eric ranted. "I'm furious that she can't be punished for what she did. The things she did to me. I'm furious that she's dead and furious that she's not here with me, and I'm alone." What am I supposed to do now? A dead man has no friends, no family, no one. I'm all alone. He sobbed, tears flowing freely once more. Gray watched him, feeling powerless, inadequate, and useless. He felt his eyes well up with empathy. You will have support, he offered, knowing how feeble it sounded. Well, that's just great, isn't it? Eric lashed out sarcastically. Inspector Gray said nothing, realizing he had said too much, likely because he had had too much to drink. He glanced at the bottles. One was empty, and the other wasn't far behind. Eric stumbled to his feet, swaying wildly, and lunged at the policeman. It's your fault she's dead. You pulled me into this mess, he raged. Eric tackled the inspector before he could get up from his seat and defend himself. He managed to land a few punches before the noise caught the attention of the two guards in the room. They stepped in, separating the two men and restraining Eric. Gray spoke to the guards in French, and after they settled Eric back into his chair, they left the room. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have blamed you, Eric said, trying to regain his composure. It's all right, I understand. These past few weeks must have been really tough for you, Gray replied sympathetically. He couldn't imagine the mix of emotions Eric must be experiencing. Knowing the facts could never fully explain it. How about we finish this and get some rest? Gray suggested. Eric didn't say anything, but he spotted his overturned glass on the floor. He picked it up and offered it to Gray. Gray poured him some of the remaining liquid and then finished the rest himself. Raising his glass, he said, "Here's to a new and better life." A new life. Eric repeated, raising his glass in agreement. 7. Martin's funeral was solemn, with only a few people in attendance. Angie's funeral was even more disheartening, as not even her friend Charlotte bothered to show up. Eric wanted to be there, but he was advised against it. On the Saturday after the funerals, Eric Williams settled in Gloucester and started working as a data entry clerk just a week later. Francoise Grimard was given sentences totaling up to 15 years each for crimes related to trafficking, exploitation, and other charges. He wouldn't be seeing freedom again. Curtis received a total of 70 years in prison. Charles received 47 years. The two traffickers were sentenced to 20 years each. Many employees of the Grimms were prosecuted, with their sentences ranging from 2 to 18 years. Charlotte received a 5-year sentence for her involvement in procurement and immoral earnings. Eric continued working as a data entry clerk, constantly vigilant to ensure he wasn't being watched by authorities. He kept a watchful eye until he was certain there had been no surveillance on him for over a year. He decided to take a 2-week vacation, driving across Europe. He made a brief stop in Brussels for a few hours. Months later, Eric retired to the Algarve. If anyone asked about his wealth, he simply said he had made wise investments.